here we go. I'm currently in an MD80. I'm at Washington Dulles International. I personally can say I've, both flown in and out of this airport many times in the past. This used to be, the general area where my brother used to live, Great Falls, Virginia. This is definitely an airport that I really like well. If there does happen to be any issue with my audio, let me know. I've turned it down a little bit, not wanting to blast anybody out of their seats. This is going to be a relatively short flight. We're going to be going into Rochester, New York. This is my home airport. Now, when we get there, I just want to give you all a heads up. Now, this is not an airport that you're going to have installed in your sim the way you see it. In fact, this is not even an airport that I've currently previously uploaded to flightsim.to. Yes, I am that developer of Rochester International. I do apologize for those that do end up watching the stream. And see, I haven't updated it in a while, and that would be mostly due to Flight Sim TO's somewhat now recent changes with them wanting to claim that my work is their intellectual property. I don't agree with it. I may eventually upload this in the future.
Autopilot.
However, I'm kind of waiting for Microsoft to, kind of get the ball rolling here finally and get the World Hub open so I can upload it straight to Microsoft and have everybody be able to download it into the game. I think that's a better option. Everybody will be able to access it. From what I understand, it will be available both on Xbox and everybody will have access to it. I feel I've done a pretty good, decent job on the scenery. I guess I'll let all of you make your own judgments on that by chance. I do not have the ability to, create custom buildings. I suppose if I had the time and I had the wherewithal to do it, maybe someday I can get there. However, if anybody is familiar and would like to, donate some of their work, get some credit in there on it, more than welcome to do that. My goal is at least to have my home airport a whole heck of a lot better than what Microsoft left it as default. Now, as this is my first stream, I'm going to make mistakes. I'll be honest, I'm not even starting up this plane, getting things going the way I normally would. But I guess that's to be expected on the first ever stream. But we'll get there. We'll have some fun. And we'll just do what we do. Have fun. It's a simulator. Now, I'll also point out to you that this is an MD82. United never owned an MD82. And even if they did, the plane certainly wouldn't have had the colors that I've chosen, but I do find myself a fan of United. Early on, and I've been streaming for a number of years, or not streaming, I'm sorry, flying and flight simming for a number of years. I did once belong to one of at least two virtual airlines that I know currently exist for United. But, how things go, you work, you've got time constraints. You don't always have time to make sure you make that mandatory number of hours, flying for, a virtual airline. You just don't always have that as an option. But I can say that there's a lot of them out there. Some of them are better than others, but if you ever do want to get involved with a virtual airline, really get that immersion going.
Boarding requested.
Do that for you. here. We will get underway as fast as I can get this done for everybody. For anybody that does take time to watch the stream or this video once recorded, I would definitely love to be able to
pilot's boarding starting.
Have you come watch a stream when it's actually live. And of course, this plane never, ever loads to zero fuel weight as designed in simulators, so you gotta play around with the weights. So I'm now showing zero fuel weight of 118,375. How do you add something here? I'm just going to kind of do my best to get it where it needs to be. It doesn't always necessarily have to be completely exact.
Crew boarding starting.
I guess maybe perhaps we should try. For me, that's close enough. Over here, the FMC. And also excuse my mouse movements, I also really need a new mouse. I have played the DPI settings a little bit, and I'll have to say that this is my first ever gaming mouse. And for me, it's taken a little bit of getting used to.
Your crew has boarded. Passengers boarding starting.
I'm sure there may also be some other options available here. I'm not going to hit them all, at least for this flight. I'm going to do what I've got to do to get this going. Somewhat typical for Dulles, or at least for when I do my place, and Sabrina wants to suggest a runway. And I know we've been looking at Clintar and made us, make a little smarter decision, but for this stream, I just want to kind of make it as easy as possible.
I'm doing good. Hi.
Out of here. I suppose we could just kind of make one up, but it's okay. And Rochester doesn't use any either. It is a smaller airport compared to something like Washington Dulles or LaGuardia, any of those more well-known airports. But just a fun fact: Rochester is like the third busiest commercial airport in at least upstate New York. I'm also kind of surprised a decent developer has never done Rochester in its full glory and used all the versions of Microsoft Flight Simulator throughout the years. There's been one kind of cruddy developer that I'll leave nameless that's made a couple of really cruddy attempts, but I suppose sometimes it is what it is. Is get the airport done that you want to have done.
I'm doing good. Welcome aboard.
My diligence to check the rating discontinuities. Now, according to the 737 driver, he says we ought to leave the discontinuities where they are. That's not something I was ever taught throughout flight sim experience. And for me, it usually creates more problems even there. 20,000.
Hi, morning.
Now is 2 Boarding of the tablet. We've got a 0 fuel weight of 122,375. And of course we've got 17.5. Now is just choose slash n. It means something. I can't remember what it means other than the way I think I'm doing it. If I remember right, this means I'm burning from the center tank first rather than the outside tanks first. I always go cost level of 50. Yeah, you can go higher, you can go lower, but at the end of the day, I see this as a sim. And hey, you know what? Crash your plane, reload it, and cost us nothing. As far as fuel used, well, real world, you know, it costs a pretty penny to fly this plane, but luckily for us, you know, in the sim world, we can use as much as we want. It's free. So I say, why not use it? I always like going flaps 15. Now, I was also going to use Bonanza tonight, but as I'm still learning how to use OBS and set things up, I really quite haven't figured that out just yet. So as far as tonight, I just kind of want to get the first stream years over with, you know, a few streams as time goes on. Yeah, I will figure it out more. I'll get to Planet here, get some tunes going. Hopefully, eventually, we have some fun conversations. For my flight planning, I do subscribe to Davigraph. It is highly suggested. Very useful. Saves us some time. Definitely gives us all the information we need to do our flight. I really love the fact that they did finally add in the ability to get all the ATIS and the weather information that you need. So you can appropriately fill out this information here. So winds are currently 170 at 8. The altimeters 290 or 906. Now I swear when this plane first came out, some of this they used to do a really good job filling out for you. I'm not really sure what changed, but I also noticed something in the Phoenix and the METAR. Some of the information that it at least recently gave me, it'd be right, but some of it, it'd be like, what are you trying to do? What is this information that you're giving me? But I think I heard that it may be, some stuff may be broken right now. That might be why, possibly. And let's see what it gives me this time. Here we go. 134, 137. It doesn't ever really seem like putting this information in here really gives you anything, but so distance looks to be about right. Altimeter's right. Get some of these lights on by the time we get there. It doesn't get darker out a little sooner. I suppose it would be a good idea to have some of these lights going. So it's not quite so dark when we arrive. altimeter. I do believe should be about ready to go. Now I'll usually set the altimeter. Make sure you get both flight directors on, which normally I would have already had done by now. I usually set 2000 on the V-speed. I'm sure somebody's going to try to tell me that I'm wrong, but this is just how I'm doing it, and how I'm doing it tonight. And of course, I forgot to turn some lights on here, but there, I got the little lights. I did. Got both the air on. I always hit this. I haven't figured out how to get those air valves up without twisting this lever. But you know, there is one thing I've learned about this plane. I am kind of happy, proud that I figured out thanks to somebody in the Mad Dog forum. That's to make the tablets disappear so we can actually have a nice view looking out the windows. And it definitely does look like GSX has finished up. And speaking of GSX, there is one thing I want to check because I keep forgetting to check. That's getting rid of this stupid pushback raise. But for now, we definitely need to get the APU going in so we can get these engines started and get underway. Now, I'm just going to turn these all the way off so they're not an issue when I start the engines. These switches going. Power. Over here, get rid of, we'll close these doors. Now we're going to tell GSX to get us out of here. I'll just make sure GSX closes the main door, as I've noticed it's got a nasty habit of leaving the cockpit or the passenger cabin door open on the PMDG.
Hello, Captain. We are ready for pushback.
People have had same issue. Don't know why that is. In fact, you know, for being my first stream, I really would have loved it to have been the PMDG. However, with the recent announcement of the tablet coming out, which is I know is something that everybody has been really looking forward to, definitely some more than others.
Departure checks completed. Bypass pin inserted.
Not that I hate the plane or that I want to do it in protest, but rather, you know, I have flown that plane quite a lot. You know, it was always my #1 go-to plane. I kind of figured it would be kind of nice to take a break from it for a few days. You know, that the tablet finally gets here. You know, it would be all that much more exciting. You know, to get in there with the tablet and have a better time. But one thing I have been learning with GSX, I know a lot of people probably haven't figured out the keyboard commands, or you know, maybe it's not as easy as X-Plane's version of the better pushback. But using the default, just turn it left and turn it right, kind of screws up the plane more often than not. So I did kind of take the time to learn the keyboard commands. So I do it. Good better pushback. Nothing ever going to be as smooth as these options in the pad. It does kind of look like that's what's prior before. All I have to do is don't get better.
Exiting from editing
Plane's
mode.
good to
Locking
go.
gear.
I told it to go. That much I have tested. I'm going to pause this right here. I'll get back with all you guys in just a moment.
Release parking brakes, please.
And we also definitely got to make sure that, well, we kind of hit those lights.
Release parking brakes, please. Release parking brakes,
Sorry, I forgot to turn it back on.
Release parking brakes, please.
You know, one thing I gotta say is these sounds with FSTL traffic, which that is, by the way, that is what I'm using for tonight's stream, is the AI traffic from FSTL. It gets pretty loud. That is one thing I'm going to have to figure out, is how to go outside and just start external views without, you know, again, blasting you guys out of your seat.
Release parking brakes, please. Release parking brakes, please. Release parking brakes, please. Release parking brakes, please. Commencing push. All engines clear. Start at will.
Definitely time to start our engines. Now, for a side, I do realize I definitely should have started the engine on the right first, but like I said, I'm nervous, and I just kind of screwed that up.
Please set parking brake.
Cockpit to ground. We have a good engine start. You can disconnect.
Unlocking gear.
And I'm not hearing all the sounds, guys. Like like the audio from GSX for some reason, I'm not hearing any of that. So what I tried to do is have all the audio come into my headset, you know, so it didn't end up coming into my mic through my desktop speakers. But I don't think I got that configured at all correctly. That's really going to kind of make flying this plane interesting, seeing that you generally can't hear the engines of this thing at all to begin with. The engines are now started. I could definitely dismiss
Tow
the
truck disconnected.
APU.
Bypass pin removed. Left is clear. Right is clear.
Turn these guys back on. Definitely didn't need the center tanks. Now, one thing I never do, guys, because it's super annoying, and GSX didn't always seem to work this way, but they make you wait forever to have the walker walk to where they need to go and raise the flag or the pin and tell you to have a nice day. That always takes too long, so I typically won't wait. I'll just wait for the tug to leave, to be honest with y'all. And this is also something I typically would have already had done. I know I'm going to miss something major at some point, and I do apologize for that in advance. Alright, so I do believe I got everything going. Can't set the auto brake for a little bit here. That should be fine. That's armed. That needs to go into takeoff. Definitely need the flaps. Get that on 15. Got our taxi lights. Everything else seems to be good to go. And I'll turn the auto throttle and everything else on once we get to the runway. Now, once we get up in the air and we're configured and I don't really have to really watch too much of anything for a couple of minutes, I would like to tell you, what my system is. Um, Perhaps maybe a little bit. I'll tell you what I did and how much I kind of had to spend to get what I got. And I think a lot of you out there would be surprised. I did a lot more than I needed to. And I'll tell you what you all really need to do if you want to get some good frames. Now, typically, I'll have my frame counter on the bottom right, but I did notice tonight for some reason NVIDIA didn't pop my counter in there for you to see. But typically at this airport, with the graphics card I currently have right now, I'd easily be sticking at 70 frames a second. And no, I do not have a 4090. And I do typically, for the most part, all my graphics are set on high. I've got just a few settings maybe on ultra. And quite frankly, from what I've played around with, well, I could easily raise them up a little bit. But I have noticed that even with what I got, you go into New York City, whether it's LaGuardia or it's JFK, between I&I builds and begrudgingly using Fielder's LaGuardia, um, with the card I do have, it's still really kind of tough, but doable with the settings I've got it on. But we'll talk about it. Maybe someday I'll get an eye tracker to make this a little smoother and a little bit easier. But until then, mouse control is generally what I got. And for me, I kind of feel like using the mouse to view rather than my TCA Boeing yoke which, by the way, is probably the best um, yoke you're going to get for the sim. And I'll admit, I do typically taxi a little fast. Faster than some, possibly faster than most sometimes. I can be just a little impatient here. And this is where I really hate these Satec rudder pedals that I have. Yeah, some say they're better quality than Thrustmaster's most basic rudder pedals, but I hate the constant. You go to use the brakes, and then suddenly it seems to think it's like you want to use the parking brake, and you gotta keep pressing them again to release it. But at this point, I'm gonna start getting all my lights on that need to be on. I'm gonna get my auto throttle turned on. So now we should be ready to go for takeoff without any alarms. Alright, so I'm going to advance the throttles. And now I'm going to hit toga. Toga, toga, toga. Alright, so here we go. And as Captain Canada always says, rotate. Now, I'm not going to hit the flight director completely. I really kind of do just want this thing to kind of speed up, gain some speed here. But I'm just going to tip the auto throttle on. Kind of seems like everything's kind of lining up in my favor. I'm just going to let the plane handle it. Alright, so the vertical speed is coming down, which is good. That'll let us get a little faster and start getting rid of some of these flaps. You want to really learn how to fly this plane. There's two people I would immediately recommend that you watch. That would be Captain Canada being first. He can fly this plane like a pro, although I do understand that he's not the biggest fan of Microsoft's version of the MD80. Um, but the other one I would watch, you should watch is 737 Driver. He does a pretty good job. He could definitely go into some explanation. I can't say as if I know he ever actually flew this plane in real life, but we definitely know he knows how to fly the 737. And now I think he's now going over to the Airbus family. I think it was said it was the 330 maybe. I can't quite remember. It'll be interesting to see if he ever actually changes his name. See, we're definitely on our way. So now that we're pretty much in flight, there's not too terribly much right now I've got to pay attention to. Um, so I'm going to share a little secret on my system. So currently, I'm on a current gen 13900K i9, and I'm finding that you don't really need that. It can help, but the reality is, unless you're a streamer, unless you're really editing a lot of videos, pictures, something along that line, doing something productive, you know, I didn't find out till after that perhaps you should find the fastest, just pretty much single core processor that you can get. Like an i7 would have done, you know, a lot better. You could have bought the top of the line i7, perhaps maybe, saved $100 or two and put towards a better graphics card. But ultimately, what I've found and what I've learned, if you've got the money to spend, that's great. Buy the 4090. Right now, it's the card everybody wants. It's the card that's going to give you everything you need, but you don't need to do that. I'm not even going to say necessarily go out and buy the 4080. Again, you don't really need to spend what is an average of last time I checked $1,300 for a 4080. What I did is I got the 4070 Ti. Um, it's not quite at the bottom, definitely not at the highest or mid, but I gotta say, for the most part, I am pretty impressed with what you can get out of a 4070 Ti with a frame generation. Until now, until I got that 4070 Ti, I couldn't even risk streaming at all with a 3060. I just couldn't do it. And I was already on an i9 processor. I already had, plenty of DDR4 memory to go along with it. It just couldn't do it. And I just did not want to lower my graphics any further, and I already had them just to be able to stream. But, if you, at a 4070, you can get between 800 and 850 from what I understand. Over the last week or two, prices have been dropping a little bit. Perhaps you can get it even less. Um, but time to get those lights off. We could go to climb. Yep, we are on climb. So we're good to go there for another little while. Definitely got a little ways to go until we reach climbing altitude. Now, the other thing I want to let you know is I am trying to also pay attention to chat. I don't see I've got anybody in there now, but if you do happen to post something, I will look and I will do my best to respond to it. Now, in real life, typically, this flight will last around 45 minutes, give or take a little bit. Now, tonight, we're going to be landing on runway 22. Now, that is kind of, honestly, my feel. It's kind of like my favorite, but my least favorite runway in Rochester. On one hand, when you're departing Rochester, that's the runway you can get to, just about the quickest. I would say it's a toss up between 22 and 28. 28, does get used a bit, especially if you're in a smaller regional jet, at least for the departures. They don't typically tend to use it for the arrivals quite so much. Um, 22 and runway 4 would be used the most in real life. Runway 10, almost never used, but theoretically, depending on the winds, they can use it. But I would say one of the reasons why they probably do not use it that often, there is no ILS, there is no glide slope, there is no localizer for that runway. You got some PAPIs, and you got your visual sight. Now, I would say for general commercial aviation, when you've got at least three other runways you could use that has all the protections and the equipment, those other three would be the safer choices. We're just about getting the transition altitude. So now I'm going to go ahead and reset my altimeter, and I'm going to cheat. I just set the letter B on my keyboard because it's the easiest thing to do. Now you can't do that in X-Plane, but I do see the point on why you can't do that in X-Plane. Now, one thing I've never, since I had brought up X-Plane a couple times, I'm not going to get into that argument on which simulator is the best. We should all use the sims that we enjoy, that we can get the most out of, for what is most important in your flight simming, engagement. I mean, each sim has its good parts and its bad parts to it. One's going to have its strengths, its weaknesses, and better for things that perhaps you're more interested in. At some point, you will see me stream X-Plane. I probably won't try to fly one versus more than the other, but we'll see. We'll see how my schedule goes, how often I can get in here to stream. You know, I guarantee I will be streaming the 737 once we do finally get that said tablet. That tablet that's been so elusive for so very long. Um, and I think I'm hoping that when we finally get the update from Robert that we're supposedly going to get this weekend from PMDG, he may go into a little detail or further detail on why it took so long. But I've also got another explanation. Not that I want to necessarily speak for PMDG, but I will say that, if you ever want to see a little bit more in depth explanation on, where the tablet was around a year ago and why we still don't have it, I would highly suggest you go, search YouTube for a streamer, Filbert Flies. Around a year ago, he had a live interview with Robert Randazzo himself, where that tablet was definitely brought up, and he definitely went into an explanation of what he had previously been considering as far as releasing the tablet goes, and basically, ultimately, why he chose not to release it at that time. Um, you know, I'll let you go watch that stream. I could come out and say the reason, but I don't want to. I'm not really here to bash another developer or to fuel any more fires in the community for the reason why he didn't release a tablet when he was thinking about doing it. Once you watch the video, you'll know exactly why I'm saying what I'm saying and what I'm talking about. But it was more than, definitively more than just having a communications issue. There were some external flight sim community events that kind of influenced this decision. Now, I kind of feel like I want to talk about it, so I'll talk about it a little bit, but I'm sure we all know the developer FSS Studios, the developer that, last January came out with the E-Jets. Now, prior to the release, they put out a couple of quick 1.5, 2 minute videos previewing the E-Jets. Those, I'll admit, those videos looked real good. The planes looked like they were finished. But one thing to take into consideration: anybody can make a video with only music in the background, um, make something look real good. Given the fact that you have the complete ability to pick and choose what the camera shows and what you want to show in that video. Um, and I'll have to say, they never said in the videos that the plane was finished. They never said, what level the plane was at, but then they had, a stream, right? They had another popular streamer from over in Europe. I believe he was probably also in Germany, also where the developers are from. And I'll have to say, to be honest, that I was more interested in watching the video rather than have YouTube open on my desktop to actually see the chat to see what was being said. But from what I understand, from just about the beginning of that stream, once people were able to see that the plane wasn't finished and that they were releasing it as early access. It didn't have the VNAV, didn't have the custom FMS. You know, some people didn't like that. So the general consensus is that the developers were getting bashed all stream long. Yeah, to some extent, the developers kept their mouth shut, but eventually they did get a little upset about it. They did make a couple of snarky remarks. Now, I'm not saying those remarks were right, not by any means. If you're a developer, you're streaming and previewing a product. I do believe that you got to be better than that. Keep your mouth shut, take it for what it is. Learn how to take the constructive criticism. But regardless, point is, as a community, not to say that I think every member of the community did it or participated in it, but generally speaking, a whole lot of people within the flight simulator flight simulator community did do what I'm about to say. So I'm just saying flight sim community in general as a whole, because that is the way some of the developers took what we did. But based on the release of the E-Jets, and some people, mind you, buying into the E-Jet, not taking the time to watch any of those streams, not watching the posts on Aerosoft's store sale page where it actually told you the plane wasn't finished, gave you a link to the developer's website so you could see what's not finished and where it's at. And also on the sales page before you bought it, tell you, hey, if an unfinished plane is not what you're looking for, it's not what you're gonna like, don't buy it. Wait for it to be finished and look at it then. A lot of people bought it anyway, and then as we know, as a flight sim community, we went banging down this developer's door, went to Discord, spent multiple days attacking them. As a community, we even went to a developer that had a similar name and started going after them. And they had to beg and plead to say, hey, we had nothing to do with that developer, that project, that plane. It made headlines. A lot of people knew about it. A lot of people found out about it, especially the developers. Well, if you go back and watch Filbert Fly's stream from around a year ago, interview with Robert Randazzo, around a year ago, we might have had our tablet. He was considering releasing it the way it was at the time, knowing that at least had some functionality. And I can't remember what he said it did or didn't specifically have on it. I think he might have mentioned it at least had some Navigraph functionality, which would have done us good. But he said that after the jets were released, and he saw how as a community that how we attacked that developer because we didn't get what we wanted when we wanted it, the way we wanted it. He was like, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not releasing it until that tablet is everything he knew we wanted and that it was complete. Because even he himself was afraid to release anything he thought we would come back upset about how it was released and what it was. He's got too big of a name to protect. PMDG, he spent a long time, a great many years, working hard building that company to, at this point, release something that's not finished, not what people wanted. You know, and I can't say personally that I blame him. I do have a bit of a business background, so I definitely can understand where he'd be coming from on that one. But luckily, we're just about finally there. We're finally just about to get our hands on that tablet. But, with that being said, it's understandable sometimes, a plane we're waiting for doesn't quite come out when we're wanting it to. Sometimes a plane that we've been waiting for comes out. There might be a couple things wrong with it. We might not like it. I'm just saying, you know, personally, I feel like as a community, on our part, we need to be a little bit better because it's going to take the community a long time to regain some developers' trust. Um, if it wasn't for that momentary, I'm going to say, moment of weakness that we had, we might have already had a tablet. There might have been a couple of other developers ready to drop something that by chance, based on what happened, they might have just walked away because they too had spent a long time working on their brand and, having a hard time writing what they want, the way they want for the sim, knowing what we want, and felt, well, I can't take a chance of putting out my work because I did the best of my ability for the tools and resources that I have, but can't take a chance on having my name destroyed. You know, for me, one thing I kind of find surprising is Maybe I missed it. Maybe I didn't hear about it, but there's a certain 737 Max that's been available for sim virtually since this sim was launched. That a lot of simmers dislike for various obvious reasons, but what I find surprising about is I don't think we ever attacked that developer the way we did FSS. There's also that developer that some streamers decide to call that developer that shall not be named. Um, I'll be honest, some people refer to him as Captain Scam. Um, Now, to their defense, I will note for anybody that took the time to look, on every product they released, they did post on the page displaying using systems from default 747 to make the plane work. It was there. Some people didn't take the time to read it, but I certainly also understand why some people didn't take the time to read it. I came from FSX. I never participated in P3D. And back at FSX, buying a plane from Captain Sim, I can't say I was always the best plane out there, but it was extremely far from being the worst. It was a pretty darn good plane. I mean, if you were looking for a plane that had the passenger cabin fully modeled, well, that's the plane you wanted to buy. It just was. They did a really, really good job that way. You could open up the lavatory doors. Now, I don't remember any of them being able to flush the toilet or work the faucets or anything, but you could go into the seats. You could raise and lower the back of the seat. You could open up the window shades. You can open up the luggage compartment doors up above. You know, it was awesome. The systems that they modeled really weren't that bad either. Um, you definitely had everything you needed to plot your route. Pretty much majority of the switches in the cockpit worked. Um, it wasn't bad. I mean, a lot of people claim Level D was better than Captain Sim 757. Some people they claim that the Quality Wings 757 was better. I never owned either one of them. I can't really say personally. Um, but just saying, we never attacked them either the way we did FSS. Now, I say personally, I think we all should have waited, held a little judgment until they actually said it was finished to see what we got then. And if alpha release not finished plane wasn't for anybody, don't buy it. That's my opinion. That's one thing you're gonna find out that I have. I have my opinion. I know all of you eventually are gonna share your opinions with me, and I do take it as a two-way street. You got your opinion. I can respect your opinion. Um, but I guess the point of that little rant was to just say, hey, let's slow down as a community. To some extent, be a little further reserved, behaved, because that little attack we had, well, we can clearly see that it cost us a tablet for a while. We could have had it. There's no guarantee Robert was or definitely going to release it a year ago, but he was definitely highly considering it. But what we did, clearly, influenced him to not to release it. Now, a funny thing about the MD80 is when this plane came out, It was always my opinion that the PMDG 37 would hopefully be the first major commercial tube liner into the sim. We already had a airsoft CRJ, but I don't. It's a regional jet. I don't really consider that to be a full size commercial tube liner. It's just too small in my opinion. It doesn't even have an auto throttle in it. Um, but this plane was the first. I do believe shortly after PMDG came out, and then it was the Phoenix. We finally had two really good, I'm going to say three really good airliners in the sim. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us know forever all we really had was a CRJ and the fly-by-wire A320. And the fly-by-wire is a really darn good plane, but it's not payware. And there's only so much they can do. Um, at least as far as the overall look at a plane, I don't think they'd ever be able to get a passenger cabin built into the plane unless they find a way to unlock it and do what they got to do to be able to do that. But at the moment, I don't really think it's necessarily top of the list for them to do. I think more people are probably concerned about systems depth. Not to mention the fact currently they're really trying to get that A380 out. Looks like still got about 7 miles to go until we're at top of descent. Looks like they really kind of want me going 137 flaps 40, 142 flaps 28. Time to get the frequencies and stuff set up here. So we're looking at 110.7. And a course of 224. Now, what you all might possibly see me do here is at some point, once we go a bit closer, you might possibly see me go head mode and vector myself into the runway. I don't always like how the flight plans get you set up for runway 22. Runway 4 is not usually ever that bad. Runway 28 is not really ever that bad, but 22, sometimes it really, depending on the flight plan and how you set it up, sometimes it takes you way out into the lake and then makes you come back. And that's just too far out. You don't need to go that far out. Real life, I'm sure there's probably potentially some real world reasoning in that, but again, you're going to find that this is a sim. Nobody should ever be afraid to use a sim the way they want to use it. Fly the planes you want to fly. Fly the routes you want to fly. Fly to the airports you want to fly to from whichever airport to whichever airport. Use the livery you want to use, regardless of whether or not that airline ever actually owned that plane. And that's going to be some of the stuff you're going to see me do. I really do treat this as a sim. My goal is to have fun and have at least some, realistic stuff to go along with it. I will do my best to do things at least somewhat realistically. You know, and I'll admit the way I'm flying this plane tonight, I haven't exactly quite done it the way I normally would, and I do apologize for that. But at this point, being my first stream, I do know Midnight Maverick is streaming tonight currently. There's a few other popular streamers flying tonight currently. I knew going into this, and I'll admit this was kind of somewhat last minute trying to figure out how to do it. I realized I probably wasn't going to get anybody watching this stream live. But if you happen to watch this after the fact, if you happen to like any of the content that I've shared, please do remember to hit the thumbs up. It really will help my channel grow. And don't forget to hit subscribe and helping me out in this channel. Hopefully as this channel can grow, we can come together, have a good time, do some different routes. You guys can probably let me know more of, something maybe you want to see. Maybe we can go to some places that maybe other streamers haven't yet decided they want to try out. I definitely know there's a few pair airports out there that aren't bad, that are actually built by some pretty decent developers that I haven't really seen some of the other streamers fly into yet. I'm not really quite sure why that is. Um, but I am looking forward to showing you some of those airports, and I'll be looking forward to showing you around my airport that I've created, for you. And I hope you like it. It has taken me some time to get it to where it's at now. I'm still not ready to say it's as perfect as I'd like to make it, and I do hope someday to be able to upload this someplace where I don't have to feel that the owner of the site that I'm publishing it on decides that they want to take ownership of it, like FlightSim.to. Now, since I've got some time and I'm now thinking about it, let me show you all the frame rates I'm getting in this plane, in this sim. Now, keep in mind, this is glitched a little bit. Hopefully next stream I'll get to have my proper overlay going, where it shows the true frames per second. But typically, what I found is if the built-in FPS counter is showing me 46 frames, for example, I'm at least getting twice that with this graphics card and the frame generation turned on. That's what I'm typically getting. Um, and I'm sorry I can't show you guys the true number, but typically, on whether it's the Mad Dog or it's the PMDG 737 or it's we're talking about the Phoenix 320. Typically when I'm definitely up in the air and I'm cruising around, I'm definitely consistently typically stayed over 100 frames a second, which is really awesome. But since this isn't really showing us any real good information, I'm just gonna kind of take that out of our way. Now, definitely getting a little closer. Got about 50 miles to go. This right over here, that's pretty much Charlotte. We're gonna be going out there, and then we're gonna be working our way back over into the airport. Figure Lake's right here. I do believe our airport. I can't really quite see it right now, but I kind of want to say it's probably somewhere out behind this window frame. All right, so we're just about getting down to 10,000. Definitely have to start making sure we're slowing this puppy down. This mad puppy. All right, so I'm going to start turning our lights on. Putting a little speed brake. Now, I am not really quite sure if I'm going to do the heading thing. I might still do it. Um, I personally think where it's got us going into Keck, that's just way too tight of an angle at the beginning of the ILS. So I am going to kind of vector myself out and around. And truth be told, if this was real life and I had a real ATC going, which at some point I probably will do VATSIM, I do kind of feel I need to get a few streams down below my belt, get things fully set up the way they should before I start including that. But also while we're waiting, make sure I get my auto brake set up. Not wanting to leave that to the last minute. But we are almost there. But those of you that don't know, the Rochester area of New York is a really beautiful part of upstate New York, western New York. Especially once you get into the fall time. You start driving out into the country, out towards the Finger Lakes. You start looking at all the different colors of the leaves changing. It's also wine country out there. There's a lot of wine tasting events going on out there. So I mean, if you're really into wine, there are a lot of you know places you can go to do some wine testing. There's a lot of people making their own wines, growing their own, you know, grapes and whatnot, doing the whole big wine thing. I'm not really personally into wine, so it's not really anything that I do, but that is a popular thing to do in the Rochester area. City of Rochester, you know, it goes a little understated. I mean, Rochester is the home of Kodak. Kodak, you know, is infamous for being around for a great many years for, its film, its cameras. The film, movie industry for years would typically prefer to use, Kodak film to make the movies. It's a shame Kodak is only a shadow of its once glory itself here left in Rochester. There's not much left here. Um, but Bausch& and Lomb is also another Kodak made company. They still have a factory here. They do still do some stuff here, but it's again not exactly as big as it once was. But another famous company that started here, for those that don't know, you know, there's something this company created so many years ago that I guarantee every one of us has in our home. If you have a computer, I guarantee you have one. They came out and invented the mouse. That's right. Xerox created the mouse, but they're gone. Now, I don't know as a whole if Xerox is completely gone and out of business, but I do have to report that their tower in downtown Rochester is now pretty much mainly being used for apartments and condos. So I don't like how fast this thing is getting me down here. So I'm going to use some vertical speed of my own because we're at the point where it's taking too long. If I time this right, we might just be able to come in and land with a halfway decent sunset. And if that happens, I'll have to say I couldn't have timed it better myself, as that was something I wasn't even thinking about or intending to do. Put a little bit more of some speed brake to kind of help slow us down or keep the speed down a little bit here. I could go faster, but really no need to rush it that much. And I'm just going to give you all a heads up. I am by no means, unfortunately, the greatest at landing the plane. Now, I also do realize that I could use Autoland. I have used Autoland in the past, but I'll tell you something. In FSX, once I started to get my hands on a really well done pair of planes, like the Captain Sim 757, the PMDG 737, man, I loved using Autoland. I'd use Autoland on every flight. It was awesome. It was perfect. I didn't really have to do anything. But then I did eventually realize that that was extremely lazy, and it was actually more fun to actually try to land your plane yourself. But that is something I have to work on and get better on. And I'll get there. We'll just have to wait and see how things go tonight. So I'm going to start turning us around here. But by the time we get turned around and we get onto that glide slope, we're definitely going to be where we need to be to properly hit it. But if anybody knows someday how to be able to get the additional feet in your altitude setting, definitely let me know. That just isn't something I haven't quite figured out yet. I'm going to start putting on the ILS there. And for some reason, I'm not even picking it up yet. But then again, I am just a little far off of it yet. I think we can just kind of start seeing the runway lights all the way out there in the distance. But I still kind of think that perhaps we should already be starting to pick that up. For some reason, it does say look fail, but I suppose maybe, just maybe, I might just be having to hand fly this thing in tonight. So I will apologize in advance. It just turns out to be the worst land ever in the world that anybody's ever had the displeasure of watching somebody land. But I definitely know for sure I've got the right frequency in there for the ILS. Well, I guess I can get the lock to at least highlight, but usually I can just hit the ILS and it'll just do its thing. I'm gonna try coming out to the right a little bit, maybe. Maybe, just maybe, it's just being a little picky. But I don't usually have this much trouble picking up the ILS. I'm gonna start slowing her down here. I'm gonna put out some slats, activate my speed brake. Oh, there we go. Now it finally wants to capture it. There we go. So I might just be able to follow the ILS after all. And that's surprising. I had to wait this long to get there. I actually put in the first thing of flaps. Then we're gonna put in flap 15. And I'll wait a little longer before I feel we need to really slow down any further here. Now, of course, I do realize there are some other things I could have done in the FMS and whatnot. There's definitely, this plane is really well done when it comes to systems. But I'm gonna have to say that it's not now or ever my goal, to be a real life pilot. That's just not ever gonna be in the cards for me. Between my vision, I do have some health issues, health concerns. It's just not something that I'd be able to do. But there's an inlet. I don't think that's Charlotte. I think it's supposed to be, but I'll have to take another look at the map. But if this is Charlotte, I don't recall this right here. I might be a little off. Still definitely got some distance to go before we capture that glide slip. All right, we're definitely getting a little closer. I'm going to start slowing her down a little bit more. Now, I do like to go a little faster than what they tell me it with this bird. Now, we are tracking the ILS. Now, one other thing I definitely need to go do, arm the auto brakes. Now, other thing I find it's better to do at this point, now that we've captured the localizer, or the glide slope, we need to set this to 0. And I'm going to ignore that we got traffic. After all, this is AI traffic. We're not on VATSIM. We're not going to be interrupting anybody else's flight. I don't at all mind bothering the computer. So we're definitely going to pretend we didn't see that. Because I am not going around. All right, so now that I'm down to 500, I am taking this over as my plane. I do believe I'm getting a little low. And the sensitivity on this plane isn't always what you expect. Not always easy. So I would kind of say that this isn't exactly the easiest plane if this is going to be your first paper plane to learn to fly. And there goes the auto throttle, my throttles, and plane. Definitely not quite on the center line, but I would have to say that overall, generally speaking, it wasn't that terrible of a landing based on, I'll be truthful to say, some of the other landings I've had, but definitely welcome to Rochester. Rochester, New York, my home airport. The airport that never really truly gets to see any love from any mainstream developers. In my personal opinion, I feel Rochester as a whole, as an airport, bigger than Syracuse. And I'm not going to try to say and compare how many gates each Rochester has, but from what it has and what its activity is, I just think that it would have been a little bit more fun for Vertical to have picked Rochester versus Syracuse. But that's just my opinion. I guess I do have to be a little biased. Because, well, this is my home airport. So definitely going to taxi to the gates, get there, we'll get passengers unboarded. Once I get that process started, what we're going to do here is I'm going to I'm going to use Flow, reset the time to, daytime so we can actually see. And I'm going to kind of do like a tour around the airport. Let everybody see just what it is I've done to this airport, things I've done, what makes this airport better than default, which was always my goal to at least make my scenery better than default. Now, as we're taxiing, well, 'cause I guess we need to have something to talk about, as we're looking out the window taxiing in. For example, I did take some time to improve the taxi lines. Now, these lines here, while put in through Microsoft's SDK, these aren't exactly default taxi lines. I did figure out how to lay the taxi lines within the sim and have a custom yellow color that you could use, as well as adding in that black background, which, by the way, is actually something that all commercial airports should have. I do believe I did read up on some requirements somewhere that, it's actually kind of a requirement because as lines fade, and with the sun hitting sometimes and whatnot, it's definitely better for visually to have that black behind the yellow. Now, as you're looking, one thing you're also going to notice here is these taxi signs. You notice how that black center box that marks the label for the taxiway that you're on doesn't have that yellow box going around it on the inside of the black border? Reality is that border is not supposed to be there, but it's something that Microsoft has always done with their taxi signs, so it seems to be what everybody figures and thinks ought to be done with the taxi signs, believe it or not. Um, Another thing I'm sure you noticed is those yellow flashing lights. That definitely took some time to learn. Um, I'll slow down and show you real quick. At the start of 2-2, you know, it's not easy to do that. It takes a lot of time. And you can't just create one thing like that and just completely copy it to whichever, ramp, uh, runway ramp you want to put them in. It's not that easy. So when you see developers do it, that's one thing you can use to know that that developer has definitively taken some time to do some things in the sim. And that is definitely one thing that you will not see that developer that's available in the marketplace called MSFS Scenery Builders. It's also, for those that don't know, the same developer available on SimMarket. You know, they go under a couple different names, but it's all the same developer. In SimMarket, one of the names they go by is FSX Scenery Design. It's the same developer. It's the same idiot. Making all those money grabs. And someday I'll show you. You know, what makes it garbage, what makes it unusable, and the more likely reason why it's so unusable. Some of you will be surprised when I show and discuss and uncover what that is. But now I'm a little upset here. Somebody's parked at my gate. This doesn't usually happen. My gate is usually empty. Because, yes, I do have a favorite gate that I like to use at Rochester. But it's okay. We got more gates I could use. We'll pick another. And there we go with the rudder pedals again, putting on parking brakes, rather. So we'll just taxi over here to the left. And I guess we'll use one of these gates. And yes, I did put these lights in here, but I'll be honest, guys. I can be blind as a bat sometimes. So unless it's daytime, I do struggle a little bit. And wow, I don't even have my parking brakes on yet. The gate's already coming. That is one thing I don't like. Start taking out some lights. Get the tablet back on. Now this is one change I don't like that they made. They're actually forcing you to turn off the engines and everything before you can request a GPU. It didn't always used to be that way. And then it started doing this BS.
The boarding requested.
Start our boarding and we'll definitely be united. Without a ground power's on so I can get my power back, and by all means I probably should have fired up the APU on my taxi in. But I didn't do that. So what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to turn this volume up just about all the way down because I really do kind of want to go out for an exterior view here.
Passengers deboarding starting.
And I'm really trying not to blast anybody's eardrums here. We're TV speakers. All right, so this is Rochester. I definitely did put in some lighting. Um, wouldn't even want to know how dark it is by default without these lights. Yeah, I really would love to have a custom terminal here. I really would. I just don't have the ability right now to try to figure out, how to go into Blender and the different various tools that are available to do it and figure it out. The funny thing is, years ago when I was in school, and by the way, that was during the 80s and early 90s, I used to be in high school, be in a computer lab, and I'd have a blast using, I think it's AFCAD, the architectural design software, you know, which kind of works much similar ways as your common day, more known tools for this goes. And I was able to do it. I had a blast. I didn't really hardly had to read any instructions or manuals. I had a really easy time figuring it out. I gotta tell you, the older you get, especially if you start having some health issues, the harder it is to do that. It just is. But for those of you that have used my scenery prior, one thing that you'll notice is I did get rid of a lot of those yellow hatch areas. Scenery, one thing I did figure out later on is you're better off using the Google Earth app versus the website. One thing you can easily do using the app is you get access to a whole lot of historical, you know, satellite imagery. You get a slider and you can go throughout the years, and you really can get an idea, of what things have changed and how they've changed over the years. And it may very well be true that that gate right over there, does still have yellow lines. And as you look through, you might still possibly make out some yellow lines throughout. But at this point, I've only really tried to include what you could definitively make out at this point. And to some extent, I just think it looks better. Um, One other thing you guys will notice is instead of using the FSX default, I'm sorry, FSX, the MSFS default jetways, I used GSX jetways. And yes, for those that don't know, if you get into scenery design and your payware developers can do this too. You are allowed to put in and use the GSX jetways. Now, my best guess for part of the same reason why I still haven't tried to upload this yet uh, is I haven't decided. Should I leave the GSX jetways in, or should I put the default jetways back? At some point, maybe somebody could tell me what you think. Because the issue is if you don't own GSX, this is what I upload. You have to have GSX in order to get these jetways, and I do believe that also means that. And I think I've tested it throughout reinstalls and playing around in the sim. If you don't have the GS jetways that I put in, it won't put in the default jetways by default. So you either have GSX to have jetways or you don't have them. And I do realize that that's not fair to some, but at the same time, as much as you have to keep on kind of updating this to keep it current and keep it working and not crash the sim, I can't afford to have two different copies going. One with and one without. The way GSX used to work, at least back in the days of FSX, it didn't matter what jetways the scenery was built with. GSX would just have the ability to read the locations of where those jetway pieces were and replace them as you chose to either replace them or not replace them. For what reason they can't do that here, I just don't know. At this at some point, if when I do upload it, I have also been trying to, work on building some custom GSX profiles to go along with the gates. Make it all that much nicer. But now is the time. One thing I can recommend, guys, you don't always have to go out and buy the payware version of this. I did it because I chose that I knew eventually I was going to be a streamer and I wanted the options, but you can get Flow for free. And I have to say, it really is a useful tool. You don't longer have that stupid pop-up bar at the top of your screen that you can keep accidentally setting off. Try to get your switches and stuff up on the overhead panel. Go ahead and get it, guys. It's worth it. But all I gotta do is hit this and hit the slider and bing bada boom. It's daylight. So now we can definitely get a better glimpse of the outside. Now, what I'm gonna do, guys, since I do have developer option open, I'm gonna quickly remember how to get the developer camera. And we're gonna go for a little walk around now. Please excuse my controls. I'm having to use the keyboard in my lap as I do not, as of yet, have my Xbox controller hooked up. Once I do that, that would have been also much better. But we'll try not to go too high up in the air. But looking around the terminal, I did leave in some pieces of equipment. Some of these I'm going to have to remove for some other reasons. Some of it being, in the way for GSX. If you notice, I got similar barricades that are really here in real life. Um, got the fences. I did put in some different buildings, similar, at least similar shape. This building here is not the building I used to have here. I don't even think it's the same building I have in the current version that is uploaded to FlightSim.to. Um, that is one of the unfortunate realities of the sim. It seems like every time they either do a sim update or that they do a world update, buildings just seem to disappear, and it annoyed me enough. I just found a building that fit. I am glad to have found this building. This building is pretty much where it is in real life. It's not exactly the same, but it's close. For those that don't know and didn't notice, I did try to do my best a little bit trying to get things back here kind of done realistically at the same time. There really is a hotel over here, next to the parking garage. Although that parking garage, I do believe, has at least one more level to it in real life. I don't think the hotel is as high as it is in real life, but I did the best I could. This building doesn't come all the way out the way it shows here in real life. It actually stops back here. And you might see some canopies up here. And you got an upper and lower ramp. You can kind of see where those ramps come out. Um, some of the more detailed things that I did. Um, these are custom um, gate markers. These are not the ones that you could use by default. Um, and I dare do it. This is kind of a slap in the face to Orbix. For those of you that have seen Orbix's San Jose in live stream or own Orbix, you'll notice that instead of doing what I did and actually making your own um, gate markers, they just use the ones that Microsoft has built in by default. And, for being payware and being Orbix, I personally say, how dare you? You guys were, Orbix was known for being the very best scenery you can get, at least back in the days of FSX. I'm not entirely sure what changed now. Um, this is something I still have to change. I need to take the time to develop my own marker. This is actually supposed to be in de-icing pad. By default, Microsoft would have you believe it's just a regular gate you could pull up into. Um, but this is generally basically the terminal. I mean, there's not really much change. You know, Terminal A, Terminal B. You know, Terminal A does have a little bit different of some ground markings. These gates here really do exist. I do have them working. I do need to go back through and remove these static people because they never go away. Um, but I mean, this is pretty much it. Um, Definitely did some more work over here. As you'll eventually notice, and I think I do still have to go back to the drawing board here a little bit, do a little bit more work, but and fix these lines here for the ground vehicles. This isn't done yet, guys. I am still working on it. I worked on this in spurts. Some of the time, I'm really heavily wanting to go in and fly my planes, and then I get tired of flying the planes a little bit, and then I go back into scenery creation. But realistically speaking, you do see these taxiways going through underneath the building, and they are really their life. And I did model. When you do have ground vehicles active, which I pretty much have mine turned down, they will go where they're supposed to go in real life. Now the parking lot, I did have done real well at one time. I don't necessarily think that this necessarily looks bad. It definitely looks better as the exclusion rectangles did start working again. And I didn't have all those extra cars put in extra by Microsoft. Um, this is the one of two cargo areas, generally aviation. Again, you'll see I've got my custom taxi lines in here. I did really did do my best to get the lines in exactly where they're supposed to be. Um, these two buildings here, again, after our most recent sim update 13, they disappeared. At some point, I will go back in and try to see if I could either refine the buildings I had or find some better alternatives than just letting the default buildings come back into place. But I figured for the moment, for sake of time and ease, I just removed the exclusions and let those buildings come back. But if you notice here, again, all these different lines, custom with the black backing. Um, One thing I'm happy about, I did learn how to make my own custom red markers, for your runway labels. These are my own. These are not, here by default. I mean, Microsoft has them by default, but they're not the default. By default, you kind of have to leave them where they force you to put them, whereas you make your own, you can put them where they're actually supposed to be. Um, another thing I was missing before was because I didn't know how to make my own markers, these ILS markers here were missing. And Microsoft didn't put their own in by default. These are something you kind of have to know how to create on your own. There is no default Microsoft way to do that. So I am learning, guys. But there's another area that I'm taking a little bit more pride in, and I'm going to show you. It's over here on this side of the airport. And a lot of this comes because I did learn how to, you know, work with custom ground markings. In case I didn't show it, you got the fuel area over here. I think I might have added a few more things over here to the fuel pad. However, now that I realize it, looking around here, I didn't realize this until now, but some of my fuel tanks are missing, guys. Not all the stuff I had here is here, so that's something else I gotta fix before I even consider re-uploading this again. I have played around over here. This is actually supposed to be a drop off of the tunnel. This whole area right here, supposed to be elevated up in the air, and it's not. But maybe that's something they fix on their own in MSFS 2024, perhaps. I mean, they are supposed to be laying to claim that the ground textures are going to be a lot smoother, elevations are going to be a lot more accurate. We'll have to wait and see, guys. Well, it really wasn't a whole lot to do here. Um, I did put in some details around here. You know, trying to have that detailed as I could make it. But what I'm really kind of more proud of comes over here. Once we actually get to the FedEx terminal. Yep, this is actually a FedEx terminal, and thank God FSTL is actually putting in a FedEx cargo plane here for you. But take a look at the cargo terminal. For you guys that love using cargo, take a look at this detail that I was able to put in here. This is definitely not here by default, guys. This is something I actually had to do. But what is a little bit more fun, this is brand new. This isn't something I really had in the scenery before. But get a load of this. Thanks to some new Microsoft scenery, I could use this, guys. We actually have the Chinooks that are actually here at Rochester in real life. Now, I can't ever say how many of these are actually here in real life, but they are here, and I now have them included in the sim. Now, these specific models, I think, are close to what we actually have here. But again, guys, I can't afford to buy my own models to put in here for freeware, and this is close enough, for taxiing down a taxiway and seeing these here. Well, in my opinion, it's close enough. Did some more work here. Some of this is for the most part stayed the same. I mean, most of everything I changed over here was I did fix the size of the general aviation parking spots. Did get the yellow and black backgrounds on it, but not much over here has changed. This over here is actually the National Guard area, where we do in fact have some more of the Chinook-like helicopters. Um, I thought I might have put in a couple Blackhawks, but if I remember right, at least looking at any of the satellite imagery that I had available, I don't know if any Blackhawks are ever flown in here or not. But just so you know, I passed it. I didn't really talk about it much, but over here, um, this right here, you know, while it is kind of a navigational tool, it's actually a de-icing pad, guys. And all these blank helicopter spots, guys, These are actually loadable up into the sim helicopter spots. So if you like flying helicopters, you can fly right in. You can load right into a helipad and take off. Now, one other key point I kind of wanted to mention, just because I'm curious and I haven't noticed, this is a fire hall I have found in my sceneries. Probably has something to do with my dad, being a fire chief in the fire hall that I grew up in. He's now since passed, but you know, my memory for him. Every airport I do, I have to find where the firehouse is and put it in and put the fire trucks in. Those got to be there. But one thing I couldn't show and mention as I was taxiing in is this area over here by default. These were also all parking spots for planes. Um, these are all actually, first spot is actually supposed to be de-ice, and I do believe these other two spots are actually run-up pads. So I guess for those of you that like flying a DC-6, these pads are for you. I do also like the DC-6. At some point, maybe I'll stream it. From what I understand, based on statements made by Robert Randazzo on future updates and personal experience flying the plane. I'm not saying it's exactly unflyable, but I will say that ever since Working Title started working on avionics, the plane doesn't fly quite right. Now, don't get me wrong, Working Title has done an awesome job. I mean, it's thanks to them that we now have a completely flyable and viable 747 and 787, and that the TBM is now finally working correctly along with a couple other aircraft. I mean, that's really awesome. For me and for those of us that own the DC-6, however, you know, um, kind of broke our plane, and we're still kind of waiting for fixes. But from what I understand, Working Title is actually working with PMD, trying to find a problem and get it rectified. But anyway, guys, this was my first stream. I do thank you for watching and/or flying along with me. I am glad that I was able to show you the current condition of my Greater Rochester International Airport, KROC for Rochester, New York. I will say that technically they did change the name, but for me, it'll always be known as the Greater Rochester International Airport, as they now have named this airport the Frederick Douglass International Airport. Now, as far as being named International Airport, I'm not really sure why. It's got the international branding or title on it. I mean, to be honest, I'm not even sure if we get any Air Canada flights into here, to be brutally honest. I mean, I think we might have once upon a time, but I mean, it's really not that small of an airport. Um, but I will say that, with the shape Rochester's in, with Kodak being practically gone, Xerox being gone, um, I, there's stuff. There's still definitely a business need for people to fly in and out of here. It's just not anything like it was back in the day, back in the 80s and early 90s, when majority of those companies were still at its glory days. Um, but again, thank you for watching. If you liked the stream, you liked what you saw, please do remember to give the stream a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe. There will definitely be other content coming. And it will be better, guys. As time goes on and I get these streams done underneath my belt, I will get better, guys. I promise. Um, but thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening or morning, depending on where you may be watching from. But thank you for watching, and and keep on flying and enjoy your night.